That was not this piece. That was this piece. A song or a tune from, I think, the first ever movie by Studio Ghibli called Castle in the Sky. And I wanted to just show how this, this is from a relatively recent film. It was released in 1989, but I wanted to show how a lot of the structures that are used in this are also found in the classical pieces by Bach and Soares. It's really interesting how there's this common thread in a lot of music, where we're seeing these similar structures in terms of form and phrase structures and harmony and key changes and things like that. So right off the bat, what I always like to do is look at the form of a piece. And here we're seeing a very conventional form. It seems like it's hard to escape some of these conventions. So we have this beautiful introduction, which is a very, very unusual, just very floating, mysterious, probably suggesting the castle in the sky. Eventually, this introduction finishes on a B7 sus4 chord, which likes to go to the tonic of E minor. So we get this beautiful introduction, so we get an intro, and then we get an A section where this melody comes in. So there we're in E minor. So there's our A section. Then we go to a B section where the music changes, it rises up, gets a bit more intense. And we head mostly towards the key of G. Now there's still hints of E minor, but much more centered around the key of G, the relative major. Very, very much like Bach, Soar, Carcassi, Carulli, Tárrega would do. A lot of the composers that we that we play on the guitar. So there's our B section, and then we go back to our A section here. So we go return to the A section. Now the melody goes in the bass. For a little while, and then we get something called a coda, which is like a little section that's, usually it's a small sort of finale, you could say, a small section that's tagged onto the end. So basically we get intro, A, B, A, coda. It's a very, very standard form to use. If you want to compose something, it's a really great form to use. If you want to be specific, you could say E minor for the A section, G for the B section, E minor again. And you could, use some really mysterious harmonies in the intro. And for the coda, you could call it an outro as well. We get sort of a similar thing where it's a bit mysterious. We could just get this melody on its own, and we get this chord, and we get this beautiful effect with harmonics. Like that. So we're seeing this, very, very, widely used form. It's called ternary form, ABA, with an intro and an outro. Now, if we look even closer, if we zoom in a level, we'll see structures that, again, we find a lot over and over again in classical music. The phrase structure of most of this song uses what's called parallel periods. So a period is like a complete musical idea. It has a lot to do with the melodic structure of something. You usually have a question and an answer. So that's called a period. And the most common type of period in music that I've found is called a parallel period, where the question and the answer mirror each other at the start of each. So the question will have a melody, in this case. So there's that part there. And then the answer, here, same melody. So they mirror each other at the beginning. So the A section that'll be 8 bars there, from bar 8 to here, 16. There's 8 bars. So we have an 8-bar question, and then we have an 8-bar answer. So that creates our parallel period, and they start with the same material. So we go back to our plan here. We can say PP, parallel period, for the A section. The B section starts off with something new. It rises up. We get 8 bars, I'm guessing, of that material, and then we get this rising up even further, where the melody goes up really high. And this is 4 bars now. Answer. Finishes differently, right? It answers the question. Usually a question is left open. It's usually done that through the dominant chord. So in this case, the B7 chord leaves the question open. The answer is closed with the tonic chord, E minor, 1. So there's our 1 chord, there's our 5 chord. We'd probably see the same in this parallel period. So yeah, so here we have B7, that's the 5 chord, open. And then when we get to the end of the answer, E minor, 1, closed. So harmonically following, it's almost as though the composer of this was trained in, the practice of classical music composition. And then we get our final parallel period, the return of the A section. So there's our question, there's our answer. The only difference now, as I mentioned, is that the melody goes in the bass. So essentially we have 3 parallel periods. There is a little bit of melody before that parallel period in the B section. There's a little bit of melody that's not a parallel period. And then we have another parallel period again. And the first phrase, the first question of this A section is down an octave. So you can see how this is all kind of mapping out into a pretty, there's a lot of structure in this. Okay, so the form, the key changes, the phrase structure, and if we look even in more detail at harmony and also at more specific melodic structures, we'll see things that we find a lot in pieces by Bach and Saw and so on. So at the beginning, where this melody comes in, this can sometimes be called a sequence, because we have this pattern which is repeated lower, and then it's almost repeated again. It's like getting that first bit of it here, and then so it's almost like creating a new sequence out of the previous sequence, and then rhythmically it's this, we have the same rhythm in this melody. So the melody's using the same rhythm again and again. It's using a very similar melodic structure. It's just gradually falling, sequencing down. And even this new sequence is derived from the first sequence. So there's a lot of structure in that. That's very, very common in Bach. And then he'll break it after the third one. It's very common. You get 1 and then 2, and then you usually break on the third one. And that's what happens here. You might start it in a similar way, but you'll start to break off. So we have sequences happening in the melody. If we look at the harmony, I like to always think about the primary chords. I've sort of developed a bit of a theory where just about any chord you C in a piece of music can be related somehow. You can relate it back to the chords 1, 4, 5, 1 in some way. So if we're in E minor, that means we're going to expect a lot of E minor, a lot of A minor, which is the 4 chord, and a lot of B or B7. And if we don't see those specific chords, we'll expect substitutions of those. So E, G, B, A, C, E. I don't think we see any substitutions of this chord in this particular piece, but that's a sharp there and a sharp there. So to create our substitutions, we just add a third below and a third above the triad. So E, G, B, D. That means G, B, D could be a possible substitution for E minor. And C, E, G, C could be a possible substitution. And we'll also see that here. So we have F sharp, A, C, E, F sharp, A, C, or C, E, G. So those could be substitutions for the 4 chord. So if we go through now, we see E minor, B minor, which is sort of like the 5th, but made minor. So instead of that, it's just made minor. So here we get this a C chord going to a G chord. So that could be interpreted. One way to interpret that is to say that it's sort of like acting as a substitution. Instead of doing that, we're making it happier by using major chords for a couple of bars, and then we go to A minor. Another way to think of this is that it's actually changed key momentarily to G, and we're going 4-1 in G. But basically, it's really nice because we get 2 minor chords and then we get 2 major chords. We have the same melody. We have a sequence, so we're hearing a very similar melody, but harmonized very differently, creating a lot of different color. Then we go to A minor, so there's our 4 chord 1. So you can see how a lot of these chords are formed off the primary chords. B7, there's our 5 chord. F sharp 7 is 5 of, it's the dominant of that one. So that's, yeah, kind of what's going on. That's going to create a lot of intensity there. So if I play from, and then we go to our answer. So we'd expect very similar chords, which we see. E minor, B minor, C, G, A minor, E minor. And then, so here it's just, that's 4, 1, 4, 5, 1. So mostly made out of the primary chords. There's a little exception because we're sort of going to the major key, you could say. And then there's basically a 1 and basically a 5 there, although it's minor. So I think that hopefully paints enough of a picture of, how the form, keys, phrase structure, harmonic structure, melodic structure, like sequences. We're finding all of these things in this beautiful piece. I need to give a shout out to the arranger, Hernan Gonzalez. So thank you for this beautiful arrangement. I just wanted to show you how there are these common threads that occur in music, that they're almost like remnants that, from the classical common practice period, it's sometimes called, where a lot of these structures were kind of like codified and made formalized, you could say, and were used so much that they just became like the terms we use sometimes, common practice. It became a common practice to use these things, and if you are aware of these tools, I think it helps you understand the landscape of a piece of music, a lot more. And it's really cool because it gives you a framework to, if you wanted to compose something, it gives you a framework that you can kind of borrow, because we're all borrowing from each other. So you could take this beautiful structure and create your own composition out of it. I'm almost tempted to do it right now, but I'm not going. I'm not going to. But yeah, we see this ternary form with these key changes, parallel periods. We see that again and again in a whole bunch of pieces. So yeah, I hope that that was informative for you, and maybe encourages you to look at music this way, or compose music trying to find frameworks in the pieces you're already playing. Look out for ternary forms. Very, very common. Lagrima uses ternary form. And it goes major, and then it goes minor, and it goes back to major. Asturias is ternary form with a coda at the end. That's the A section, very long, and it goes with the strumming and everything. And then the B section, very spacious. And then we go back to the A section. And then we have a coda to finish the piece. And I'm sure you'll find lots of parallel periods in both of those pieces, actually. So if you want to learn more, you can visit creativeclassicalguitarist.com. Take the composition challenge. Maybe I'll put a link in the video description. And there's a framework there you can follow that basically puts a lot of these types of things we've talked about into a template that you can then compose into. So it really helps people who've never composed before to get started. So thanks for watching.